three women posed for a photo. 100 years later, scientists zoom in and are shocked. Have you ever looked at an old photograph and felt like you were peering straight into another world? Sometimes a simple photo can be so much more than a frozen moment. It's like a secret doorway to the past, holding stories we've all but forgotten. And every so often, buried in the dust of history, an ordinary picture reveals an extraordinary secret. Something so powerful it can actually change what we know about science, and even rewrite a piece of history. The photo at the heart of today's story is one of those rare images. Taken over 100 years ago, it shows three young girls standing outside a weathered textile mill. Nothing fancy, just a quiet, black and white scene that sat tucked away and ignored for decades. Most people would have flipped right past it, never guessing that this unassuming photo held the key to a discovery no one saw coming. So what was hiding in the eyes of that little girl? How did an old, faded photo become a crucial piece of medical evidence? And how could a single snapshot end up saving lives, millions of them? To answer those questions, we need to turn back the clock, all the way to 1912, and uncover a story that's every bit as miraculous as it is true. Inside the mill, a harsh reality in 1912. Let's rewind the clock to 1912, right into the heart of Gastonia, North Carolina. It's the height of the Industrial Revolution, a period celebrated for its dazzling progress, new inventions, and the promise of prosperity. But for countless families, the reality looked very different, especially inside places like the Port Mill, where three young girls posed for a photograph that would outlive them all. If you had walked through the heavy doors of the Port Mill that year, you wouldn't have heard laughter or schoolyard games. Instead, you'd be greeted by the relentless thunder of spinning machines, the sharp scent of oil, and a heavy, choking fog of cotton dust swirling through the air. This dust hung so thick you could almost see it moving in the sunlight, settling over everything and into everyone's lungs. Here, children barely 9 or 10 years old worked side by side with adults. They spun thread, cleared jams from the looms, and swept endless piles of lint from the floor. These weren't easy chores either. The jobs demanded constant focus, nimble fingers, and a surprising amount of strength for such small bodies. In those days, childhood wasn't something you experienced. It was something you lost early and forever. For many families, there was no choice. Wages were low, and every able hand, no matter how small, meant a slightly better chance of putting food on the table. That's why you'd see girls like Pearl Turner, only 9 years old, and her companions Viola and Penelope, 14 and 12, working long hours every day. Their youth didn't shield them from exhaustion, danger, or disease. On the contrary, it made them even more vulnerable. The air inside the mill wasn't just uncomfortable, it was deadly. There was no such thing as proper ventilation, so the fine cotton fibers floating through the room would slowly build up in workers' lungs, causing relentless coughs, chronic illnesses, and far too often an early death. Some doctors even called it mill fever or brown lung, and it haunted nearly every child who set foot inside those walls. Most child workers in the mills never saw a healthy adulthood. Their childhood dreams were traded for the drudgery of survival. Yet, in the midst of all this hardship, life kept moving. For the mill workers, the days blurred together, shift after shift, year after year. But on one rare occasion, something extraordinary happened. A photographer arrived to document the faces of child labor. In 1912, photography was no everyday affair. Cameras were huge, heavy, and expensive, and the act of being photographed was almost ceremonial. Subjects had to hold completely still, sometimes for as long as 30 seconds, or the picture would blur. Smiling was out of the question, both because it was hard to hold and because for many, smiling in photos was considered undignified or even foolish. There were strange photographic customs in those days too. Mothers hidden under blankets to prop up babies, post-mortem photos of lost loved ones, and headless pictures created by clever editing. But as cameras became more common, some brave photographers started turning their attention away from fancy portraits and toward the gritty, hidden corners of society, showing America life as it really was. It was one of these moments that captured Pearl, Viola, and Penelope, standing outside the mill. Their eyes, solemn and wise beyond their years, stared straight into history. They had no idea their image would survive for a century, nor that it would one day help unravel a scientific mystery no one could have imagined. This simple, haunting photo would become a silent witness, not just to a single moment, but to an era, a struggle, and a secret waiting to be discovered. The moment captured, a photograph that would outlive time. Thomas Himmel was no ordinary photographer. In an age when most photographers aimed their lenses at posed families or grand landscapes, Himmel pointed his camera straight at reality. He was one of the few with the courage to use photography as a mirror, to show the world the hidden pain and injustices that most people chose to ignore. As part of a growing movement determined to document the grim truth of child labor, Himmel's mission wasn't to preserve suffering, but to shine a light on it, hoping his images could spark real change. On that day in 1912, as the sun filtered through the dusty air, Himmel made his way to the port mill in Gastonia, North Carolina. He walked through the relentless whir of machines and the clouds of cotton dust, scanning the scene with a practiced eye. And then he noticed them. 3 young girls, Pearl, Viola, and Penelope, lingering together by the old factory wall. There was something about their posture, the way they pressed close, each carrying a different weight. Without fanfare, Himmel lifted his camera. One quick moment, one sharp click, and their world was caught forever on film. That instant, brief as it was, captured so much more than just faces. The resulting photograph froze not only the likeness of 3 child workers, but also the invisible burdens they bore. You can see it in the way Pearl, just 9 years old, meets the lens head-on. Her eyes hold a depth well beyond her years, perhaps exhaustion, maybe fear, or even the numbness that sets in when childhood is lost too soon. Next to her is 14-year-old Viola, her face marked by lines of fatigue from shift after shift. In the center stands Penelope, 12, her expression almost haunting in its emptiness. She could be anyone, and heartbreakingly, she represents everyone, the millions of children thrust into adult responsibilities before they'd even had a chance to grow up. For Himmel, this photograph was evidence, a stark reminder of what unchecked progress looked like for America's youngest and poorest. Like many of his works, it was intended as proof for the reform campaigns fighting to end child labor. But once those campaigns faded, so too did the photo's immediate importance. It was boxed away, tucked into archives with hundreds of other artifacts from a troubled era, quietly waiting for someone to care enough to look again. This image was nothing like the colorful, carefully posed portraits crafted by elite photographers of the day. There was no luxury here, no careful retouching or paint to soften the truth. Instead, what Himmel captured was raw and honest, a single, unembellished window into a world most people would rather forget. At the moment the shutter clicked, neither Himmel nor the 3 girls could have dreamed of the photo's future. To them, it was just another day, another small act of endurance. But in time, this plain black and white snapshot would become something much greater. It would hold the key to a scientific discovery, one that would ripple out, changing lives and saving millions. Back to the present, a discovery that shook everything. 100 years had slipped by since that photograph was taken outside the port mill, and the world had transformed in ways those young girls could never have imagined. In 1912, a camera was a luxury. Now we live in a digital age where millions of photos are snapped every day, and advances in technology let us see the past with stunning new clarity. Modern tools can restore and magnify even the most faded images, letting historians and scientists unlock stories thought to be lost forever. At a quiet university archive, Professor Sonia Abernathy, a historian with a passion for lost stories, worked closely with her sharp, eager assistant, Marcus. Together, they were leading a project to digitize mountains of historical documents and old photographs, breathing new life into dusty relics from the past. Every week, they scanned thousands of black and white prints, each one a tiny window into a forgotten world. One afternoon, as they sifted through another stack, a single image grabbed their attention. three young girls standing together outside the port mill, frozen in time since 1912. Something about the photograph felt different. Perhaps it was the way the youngest girl, Pearl, stared back at the camera with eyes that seemed to hold a secret. Curious, Sonia and Marcus decided to push the limits of modern technology. They uploaded the photograph into AI-powered software, tools like AI Image Enlarger, Pixel R, Waifu 2X, that can magnify old photos by 200%, 400%, even 5,000%, all while maintaining clarity. The kind that can sharpen old photos, enhance tiny details, and zoom in at levels the original photographer could never have dreamed of. With a few clicks, the grainy image sharpened. They zoomed in on the girls' faces, the software bringing long-lost features into focus with almost surgical precision. Next, they used advanced facial recognition tools to study the details, skin texture, bone structure, and any subtle anomalies that might be hiding just beneath the surface. At first, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. The girls looked just as history had remembered them. Tired, unsmiling, weighed down by the burdens of mill life. But then, as they honed in on Pearl, just 9 years old at the time, they spotted something different. It wasn't her expression, it was something deeper, subtle, and barely visible, but absolutely there. A small irregularity in the shape of her face, a hint in the way her features were formed. It was a clue, one the naked eye could never have caught. What started as simple curiosity quickly escalated into a full-scale investigation. Sonia and Marcus threw themselves into the hunt, combing through factory records, old census documents, genealogy sites, and public archives. Details about children like Pearl were often scarce. Many lived their whole lives in silence, never making it into the history books. But slowly, piece by piece, they began to reconstruct her story. And what they found shocked them both. Against all odds, Pearl Turner, the little girl immortalized in that faded photo, had lived to the age of 66. In an era when most child mill workers rarely made it past adolescence, Pearl had survived into adulthood and beyond. This was no accident, Sonia felt sure. There was something unique about Pearl, something inside her that set her apart. The Turner adaptation, a genetic discovery from the past. Driven by curiosity and the need for answers, Professor Sonia Abernathy and her team refused to let Pearl Turner's story fade into the archives. The mystery of how a young mill girl managed to survive well into adulthood, when so many of her peers never made it out of childhood, was too compelling to let go. Determined, the team revisited that old photograph, this time armed with the very latest in imaging technology. They used sophisticated tools borrowed from the world of art restoration, scanning every pixel for clues. These techniques could do more than just sharpen a faded image. They could reveal the tiniest features, the subtlest lines and shapes that hinted at what made Pearl different. Every freckle, every contour of her face became a potential clue in this high-stakes puzzle. But they didn't stop there. Sonia and her team also gathered every scrap of information they could find about Pearl's health as an adult. Surviving medical notes, doctor's visits, even oral histories from surviving relatives. No detail was too small. They meticulously compared Pearl's story to modern research on respiratory diseases, especially those caused by years of breathing in industrial dust. And then, after weeks of late nights and mounting anticipation, it happened. The breakthrough they'd been searching for. By combining everything they'd learned from the enhanced photograph and the patchwork of historical health records, the researchers reached a groundbreaking conclusion. Pearl Turner likely carried a rare mutation in the MC1R gene. The MC1R gene is most famous for influencing skin and hair color. Think red hair, freckles. But Sonia's team suspected there was something much more powerful at play. Their bold hypothesis? In Pearl's unique case, the MC1R mutation didn't just shape her appearance. It may have given her a genetic edge against the dangers of the cotton mill. Day after day, year after year, Pearl and the other children breathed air thick with microscopic fibers. For most, this meant chronic illness, inflamed lungs, and often an early grave. But Pearl had survived. Somehow, her body had resisted the damage that felled so many others. The team theorized that her rare MC1R mutation could have helped her immune system respond better to the onslaught of cotton fibers, reducing lung damage or helping clear the particles more effectively. For the first time, a faded photograph and the life story behind it had opened a window onto a whole new biological mechanism. A discovery that could have implications for workers, patients, and even entire industries far beyond one North Carolina mill. The scientific community took notice. Sonia presented her team's findings at a major international medical conference, and the response was electric. Researchers, doctors, and geneticists alike were astonished that a piece of forgotten history, a simple black and white photo, had sparked a new direction in genetic medicine. To honor Pearl's resilience and the incredible discovery her story inspired, the researchers called the condition the Turner adaptation. But perhaps just as important as the genetic breakthrough itself was the lesson behind it, that sometimes the solutions to today's most complex medical mysteries can be found in the overlooked details of yesterday. A daughter remembers, living traces of the past. Determined to prove her theory and to discover the real person behind the photograph, Professor Sonia Abernathy set out to find anyone who might still remember Pearl Turner. After weeks of searching through family trees, public records, and genealogy sites, her search led her to a cozy little house at the end of a quiet street. There, surrounded by walls lined with family portraits and shelves full of memories, lived Rachel, the only surviving daughter of Pearl Turner. Stepping inside Rachel's home was like stepping into a living museum. Everywhere Sonia looked, there were snapshots of Pearl's journey. Faded wedding photos, birthday celebrations, old Polaroids, and even black and white prints from decades past. These images told the story of a woman who'd gone from a weary mill girl to a loving mother and grandmother. When Sonia presented Rachel with the digitally enhanced copy of the 1912 mill photograph, the one showing Pearl at just 9 years old, Rachel was overcome with emotion. She stared at her mother's young face, eyes wide with both weariness and quiet determination. For a long moment, Rachel couldn't speak. It was the first time she'd ever seen her mother as a child, and the image opened a floodgate of memories and unspoken questions. With tears in her eyes, Rachel began to reminisce about her mother's life. She spoke of Pearl's gentle strength, her quiet perseverance, and the hardships that had shaped her. Despite living decades longer than most mill workers of her time, Pearl had carried the scars of her early labor. Rachel recalled the days when her mother struggled to catch her breath, the hospital visits, the bouts of exhaustion that would keep her home from work. It was all there, the legacy of the mill, and a living testament to Sonia's hypothesis. The Turner adaptation offered Pearl an edge, but not total immunity. But this meeting was about more than just reconnecting with the past. It was a pivotal scientific moment. With Rachel's consent, Sonia's team collected a DNA sample to test for the rare MC1R mutation they suspected Pearl had carried. When the results came back, the team was stunned. Rachel had inherited the very same genetic marker, confirming that Pearl's remarkable resistance to industrial lung disease wasn't a fluke, but a trait passed down through generations. This discovery changed everything. What began as a blurry, century-old photograph had grown into a multi-generational story, one traced through memories, medical records, and now, irrefutable genetic evidence. The Turner adaptation was no longer just a theory or a historical curiosity. It was a living reality, a testament to how the resilience of one young girl could echo through time and science. For Rachel, it meant a newfound understanding of her mother's struggles and her survival. For Sonia and her team, it meant the story could finally be told in full. From a forgotten child laborer, frozen in time, to a legacy literally written in the code of life itself. Pearl Turner's journey had come full circle, her strength preserved not just in memory but in the very DNA of her family. And now, in the future of medical research. Scientific impact and social legacy. The discovery of the Turner adaptation, sparked by a single long-forgotten photograph, sent shockwaves far beyond the walls of academia. What started as a simple historical investigation quickly became much more: a breakthrough in medical science and a living testament to the resilience of the human spirit. In the world of medicine, identifying the MC1R gene mutation and its link to increased resistance against lung damage was nothing short of revolutionary. For the first time, scientists had concrete evidence that a rare genetic trait could help the body withstand years of exposure to harmful dust. Something that has plagued generations of workers, from textile mills to coal mines and construction sites. Motivated by the story behind Pearl Turner, researchers set out to turn her legacy into action. They began working on new therapies designed to mimic the Turner adaptation, developing ways to strengthen the body's natural defenses against airborne toxins. These innovative treatments are already making a difference for people still at risk today, saving lives and sparing families the heartbreak of occupational disease. Incredibly, all of this progress can be traced back to one little girl's resilience, captured in a photo that nearly slipped through history's cracks. But the impact didn't stop in the laboratory. The Turner adaptation became a rallying point, a symbol bigger than any one person. Pearl's story and her haunting image inspired not just doctors and scientists, but historians, photographers, educators, and advocates for workers' rights. The very photograph that had once gathered dust in an archive now hangs in a place of honor at a museum built on the original grounds of the Port Mill in Gastonia, North Carolina, the same mill that once stole childhoods and futures from so many young workers. Today, people from all walks of life visit that museum, drawn to the quiet strength shining from the faces in that photo. It stands as a powerful reminder of how far we've come and how much we owe to those whose stories were almost lost. The image is a silent monument to both the tragedy and the triumph of survival, proof that, even in the harshest environments, life finds a way to adapt, to persevere, and sometimes, to overcome. The story of the Turner adaptation spread quickly, moving from scientific journals to national headlines, sparking conversations that crossed boundaries of profession and passion. It encouraged people everywhere to take a second look at old records and artifacts, to re-examine the past with fresh eyes and new technology. Who knows what other secrets might be waiting, patiently, in boxes and albums all around the world? More than just a medical term, the Turner adaptation is a lesson in hope and endurance. It's a story about the strength that lies hidden in ordinary people, about how survival against all odds can leave ripples felt for generations. It's a call to remember that history is never truly gone, and that sometimes the most remarkable discoveries come from the most unlikely places. Sometimes, the future is written in the past, just waiting for someone to look close enough to see it. A photograph, a legacy, and the lives it touched. Pearl Turner's story, and the secret locked away in that 1912 photograph, reminds us of a powerful truth. Every old photo is more than just a picture. These images are living witnesses to the past. They hold stories, lessons, and sometimes the clues to breakthroughs no one ever expected, just waiting for someone curious and determined enough to look closer. It's incredible to realize that Pearl, an ordinary mill girl from a century ago, had no idea she carried a rare genetic gift. She never knew that a simple photo, snapped during a moment of exhaustion and survival, would one day become the key to saving millions of lives. Her image, once nearly forgotten, is now a lasting contribution to science and a testament to the quiet strength that so many have carried through history. Today, we're surrounded by countless images, on our phones, in old albums, tucked away in drawers. Pearl's story shows us just how much power a single photograph can have. It's not just a window to the past, but a living fragment of real life, full of meaning and potential. Who knows what other secrets or discoveries are waiting in your attic or hidden deep in a family album? Maybe the next world-changing revelation is already right in front of us, disguised as just another ordinary old photo. Pearl's story leaves us with so many emotions. What surprised or touched you most? Share your thoughts or your own story in the comments. The history of child labor in America. It might sound shocking today, but there was a time not so long ago when kids across America were expected to work just as hard as adults. In the early 1900s, you could find children in cotton mills, coal mines, and out on city streets, selling newspapers or shining shoes from dawn to dusk. But how did we end up relying on child labor in the first place? And more importantly, what finally made us stop? Right now, America is actually facing a serious labor shortage. Millions of job openings with not enough adults to fill them. This has led some lawmakers to float the idea of relaxing child labor laws and letting more teens take on riskier jobs. In places like Minnesota and Iowa, new laws are already allowing 16 and 17-year-olds to work in construction or manufacturing. Even Congress has debated whether teens should be allowed to work in logging operations under adult supervision. And in Arkansas, they've even dropped requirements for verifying the age of workers under 16. Not everyone is thrilled about this. Critics say it feels like turning back the clock to an era when children were treated as cheap labor, often at the expense of their safety and futures. Back in the Industrial Revolution, childhood wasn't seen as a time for play or growth. Most families expected kids to help out, whether it was chores around the house or working in the fields. As factories and mills began to dominate the landscape, these family contributions soon expanded to long, grueling shifts on factory floors. By 1904, 1 in 4 Southern mill workers was a child, and nearly half were under 12 years old. It wasn't just in factories either. In cities, child newsboys, known as newsies, worked brutal hours, sometimes 7 days a week. Employers argued that keeping kids busy kept them out of trouble, but the reality was much harsher. Children in coal mines, for example, faced deadly risks. Minors under 16 were 3 times more likely to die on the job than adults, and 75% of children killed in the mines were under 16. As more journalists and reformers began shining a light on these conditions, public opinion started to shift. Doctors raised alarms about the physical and mental damage caused by child labor. Kids suffered stunted growth, anxiety, and lifelong health issues. Reformers argued that putting children to work robbed them of education, happiness, and their futures. Gradually, things began to change. By the early 1900s, rising standards of living meant some families could finally afford to let their kids just be kids. The push for reform grew stronger, and the meaning of childhood itself began to shift. From a time of work to a time of learning and growing, major federal efforts to end child labor were introduced, but progress was slow. Early laws were struck down by the Supreme Court, and a constitutional amendment failed to pass. It wasn't until 1938 that Congress finally passed the Fair Labor Standards Act, setting nationwide rules on hours and banning dangerous jobs for minors. Even then, loopholes remained, and child labor persisted in some industries. Today, as debates around child labor resurface, we're faced with hard questions about the future we want for our children. While some families still depend on kids' wages to get by, history shows that the answer isn't putting children at risk. It's creating fairer wages, safer workplaces, and new opportunities that let every child dream a little bigger. Because in the end, every kid deserves more than just a paycheck. They deserve a future. New York City subway system, 1980. A typical college dorm room in the 1910s. Harriet Tubman in her old age. The evolution of women's bathing suits, 1875 to 1927. Winter fun in the old days? The Great Sphinx of Giza, with a tail. Leonardo da Vinci's painting, the most expensive ever sold. In 1907, Annette Kellerman was arrested for wearing this bathing suit. The Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. as it looked in 1907. The Golden Gate Bridge during its construction. Mount Rushmore before the presidential faces were carved. Galileo's phases of the moon drawings from 1610. Queen Elizabeth II at 18 years old. Dance marathons were so grueling, people fell asleep standing up. Survivors of the Titanic disaster. California alligator farm, where kids were encouraged to get up close. The massive cable supporting the Golden Gate Bridge. The average polar bear's size compared to a human. Hong Kong in the 1920s. A young Teddy Roosevelt seen in the second-story window. Maud Wagner, the first female professional tattoo artist in the U.S. Mary Ann Bevan, dubbed the world's ugliest woman in 1920. The Oval Office without furniture. Neil Armstrong's Gemini 8 space capsule. After landing in the Pacific Ocean, what a U.S. dollar bill looked like in 1917. The Statue of Liberty in Paris before its journey to New York. Night fishing, 1948. The last known photo of the Titanic afloat, April 12, 1912. Train travel in the 1890s. (1950s), all women's hot rod club in Kansas City. Inside the first-class lounge on the Titanic. A couple riding a Malvern Star. A Brest tandem bicycle in the 1930s. The man in the middle? A college-aged Richard Nixon. A man begging for his wife's forgiveness in divorce court, 1946. The Times building under construction in 1903. Now the heart of Times Square. Albert Einstein's desk on the day he died. The original Michelin Man design was absolutely terrifying. The Eiffel Tower under construction. Hershey factory workers. Wrapping chocolates by hand, 1937. Three women in Marshall, Texas, 1899. Take Your Walkman to the Beach, 1923. A Beautiful Couple in Venice, 1890s. Two ladies riding in a Lawson's Motowheel, 1902. A woman charging her electric car in her garage, 1912. Couple in a Model T Ford at Balanced Rock, 1920s. Montreal playgrounds were on another level, 1950s. World War I soldiers paying tribute. Roller skating, 1930s. Brazilian girl refusing to shake hands with João Figueiredo, 1979. A father helping his son feed a giraffe at the London Zoo. Queen Genepil, the last queen of Mongolia, 1920. A woman riding an early scooter, 1916. How did you think all these pictures were taken in 1909? Children on a Spiral Staircase, 1965. A small girl balancing on her mother's hand, mid-1900s. Portrait of an interesting hairstyle, 1894. Portrait of Arctic explorer Peter Freuchen and his wife, 1947. How the presidents on Mount Rushmore were originally planned to look. Couples in a Bar, Pittsburgh, 1959. A rare photo of 3-year-old Albert Einstein. Charles S. L. Baker and his assistant demonstrating a heating radiator system, 1906. Gay Jewell declared the world's heaviest man in 1899. Learning to ride a bicycle, 1961. The nuclear bombing of Nagasaki, Japan, a view from the ground. New York children, sleeping on the fire escape to stay cool at night. Britain's oldest door, built nearly 1,000 years ago in the 1150s. A Stroll in the Park, 1937. Margaret Gorman, the first Miss America winner in 1921. Two boys sharing their cultures. King Tut's tomb, shortly after its discovery in 1922. Anatoly Golimbievsky, decorated Soviet veteran who lost his legs, 1989. Early morning wake-up calls, knocking on windows before alarm clocks. A Kiss in Central Park circa 1974. Thomas Wedder's The Man with the Largest Nose in History, 7.5 inches. A French girl kissing an American soldier on Valentine's Day, 1945. Abraham Lincoln's second inauguration in 1865. Can you spot him? Bruce Lee performing a 2-finger one-arm push-up, circa 1970s. Competitors at the 1980 Space Invaders World Championship. Vincent van Gogh's painting palette. The first ever photograph of the moon. First-class air travel in the 1960s. A newly built telephone tower in Sweden, 1886, covered in wires. Robert Wadlow, the tallest man who ever lived. The inside of a quarter, what it really looks like. The end of the 13,000-mile Great Wall of China. First-class travel on an airplane in the 1950s. The interior of an airplane in 1925. The world's thinnest man and the world's fattest man in the 1800s. The world's largest horse in 1930. One of the few known photos of Vincent van Gogh, shown here at age 20. The violin of Wallace Hartley, bandleader on the Titanic. Ice mountains on Pluto, captured by NASA's New Horizons probe. The world's oldest surviving photograph, taken by Nicephore Niepce in 1827. A teenager at an Elvis Presley concert. April 6, 1957. The Speyer wine bottle, the oldest known bottle of wine on Earth. Enoch Man teaching a boy how to shoot, circa 1920. Valentine Tapley, who never cut his beard again, after 1896. Charles Tripp and Eli Bowen riding a tandem bicycle, 1890s. The real outfits worn by doctors, treating plague patients in the 1600s. A game of unicycle basketball in Harlem, circa 1960s. A rare view of the Statue of Liberty's scalp from the torch. David Hensley, crippled by polio, wearing leg braces, 1948. Serbian soldier sleeps beside his father, 1915. A portrait of male lovers, 1850 to 1950, when homosexuality was illegal. The old Cincinnati Library before its demolition, 1874 to 1955. Two Armenian women posing with rifles before battle, 1895. The night prohibition ended December 5th, 1933. A rare photo of a 1970s remote control. Roland, a 4,000-pound elephant seal, photographed in 1930. Charlie Chaplin meets deaf-blind author Helen Keller, 1919. Young girl with prosthetic legs, England, 1890 to 1910. An angry kangaroo knocks out a woman. Trying to take its photo, 1960s. Two girls dancing in the streets of London, 1954. Do your bit. Skate to work. Save gas. New York City, 1940s. A homecoming prisoner in Vienna, Austria, circa 1946. Sophia Loren, circa 1955. Hans Lange, a German World War I veteran, in 1998. Little Big Man from the Netherlands, 1904. Victorian women who never cut their hair, 1860 to 1900. Hong Kong in the 1950s. Hugo Gernsback, inventor of teleglasses. Welsh woman washing her mine-working husband, 1931. An Apsaroki man on horseback, 1908. New York City, after a snowstorm, 1888. Formal portraits rarely featured smiles, 1912. Miss Perfect Posture Contest winners at a chiropractor's convention, 1956. The Puddle Jumper, 1934. Photographer capturing the streets of London, 1929. Fuss, Four Boys Jamming, 1928. Carving the Eye of Thomas Jefferson Mount Rushmore, 1936. Two girls posing with their snow fort, 1910. A woman standing while riding her motorcycle, 1920s. Female motorcycle officers, Los Angeles, 1927. Friends having a picnic, 137 years ago. Sisters Florence and Susie Freermuth, 1921. Three Sisters Mounting Horses, 1914. A Happy Family Taking Home, Their Book Haul, 1940. Original photo of the discovery of the tomb of Tutankhamun, 1922. The Italian Royal Family, 1905. Children playing on a cart in Harlem, New York, 1920s. Teen boy covering a girl's eyes, 1940s. The Elegance on the Streets of New York City, 1928. A circus strongwoman, balancing a piano on her chest, 1920. A couple of Victorian travelers, 1890s. James Stewart enjoying a beach read with Valerie Varda. Postwoman from the 1910s. Robert Earl Hughes, the heaviest person on record at 1,071 pounds, 1926 to 1958. A man trying Coca-Cola for the first time, France, 1950. First King of Saudi Arabia, Ibn Saud, early 1950s. Little girl getting water at the farm, Maine, 1942. A stylish family outing, 1946. Going to the beach with style, 1915. Netflix and chill, 1912. The 1944 eruption of Mount Vesuvius. Aerial photography in Edinburgh, circa 1920. Marilyn Monroe in a funhouse mirror, 1950. San Francisco's iconic Cliff House. Don't mess with Granny, early history. An engineer wiring a primitive IBM computer, 1958. New York City construction workers. Lucille Ball on the day of her wedding to Desi Arnaz, 1940. Schoolgirls in gas masks, World War II. Anti-drinking public service announcement, early 1900s. Thank you for watching. If Pearl's story stirred up memories or got you thinking about your own family's past, we'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed traveling back in time with us, don't forget to like, subscribe, and explore more stories right here on Past Not Past. There's still so much more to discover together.